In Yu-Gi-Oh!, the only trap cards that see competitive, widespread play are ones which can be activated from the hand, or have the effect to negate a card. So in this list, we'll be looking at the best trap cards in the game that don't fall into those two categories. And at number 10, we have Metaverse. This trap card simply has the effect to either add a field spell card from your deck to your hand, or activate it straight from your deck. When this card first came out, it was thought to be the worst version of terraforming, since you had to set this card and wait a turn before you'd be able to search out the field spell card. But this was before Mystic Mine was in the game, and that field spell card kind of changed Metaverse into an extremely good card, which was better than terraforming in this particular circumstance. You see, what Mystic Mine does is it's really good at locking down your opponent from using monster effects, as if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, they cannot activate monster effects nor declare attacks. But this card destroys itself near the end phase if both players control the same number of monsters, and having 0 monsters on the field counts as having the same number of monsters. So the best way to use this card is to activate it during your opponent's turn when you have no monsters on your side of the field and they just summoned 1 monster or something. It will lock them down from being able to use monster effects, and it makes it so you don't have to have a monster on your side of the field. That way your opponent can't match the amount of cards to destroy Mystic Mine with its own effect, unless they have some way to wipe out their own monsters, or destroy Mystic Mine with some other spell or trap card removal in the form of a spell or trap card, as they can't use monster effects. And basically, because of Mystic Mine, Metaverse got limited on the ban list, and terraforming as well, though they've been releasing a lot of really good field spell cards in the past couple of years, so it was really only a matter of time before they started hitting the cards that searched them out so easily. Especially since Metaverse itself is pretty easy to search out with another card on this list, which I'll talk about later. And at number 9, we have Subterror Final Battle. This card is kind of like one of the cornerstones of the Subterror archetype, and is a very strong card that does basically everything. When you activate the card, you get to choose one of its 4 effects to use, and then after you use it, the card just sets back on the field instead of going to the graveyard. Kind of like Scrap Iron Scarecrow, which is kind of ridiculously good, because what these 4 effects are, is you can flip a Subterror monster face up, flip a Subterror monster face down, give a Subterror monster a crazy high attack boost, or make it so the effect of your Subterror cards cannot be negated this turn. And Subterrors are all about flipping themselves up and down, so being able to do either of those 2 things, make it so your opponent can't negate your effects that turn, or just allow any of your Subterror to beat over basically anything, are all excellent effects. And also a whole bunch of effects that you probably need at different times. And to add to this card, it's not a hard once per turn. Sure, you can't put this card up and down a whole bunch of times in the same turn, because when it's flipped back face down, you still run into the ruling of trap cards where they cannot be activated the first turn they're set. However, if you have other copies of this card in the field, you can use all of their effects. And this card is easily searched out with Subterror Guru, who is kind of the cornerstone of the Subterror archetype. Subterror Battle is just kind of a one-in-all card, and these kinds of cards just don't really exist in the game. Especially not ones that allow themselves to be reused multiple times, which is definitely why Subterror Final Battle has to take a spot on this list. It's really good, part of an archetype that regularly sees competitive play, even if not in large amounts, and can't be activated from the hand nor negate card effects. And at number 8, we have Unending Nightmare. This is a continuous trap card which has the effect where you can pay 1,000 life points to destroy 1 face-up spell or trap card on the field. And this effect is not once per turn, so what's great about this card is that if you have this card face up, you're basically set for the rest of the duel in destroying your opponent's face-up spell or trap cards, like Mystic Mine for example, or any other continuous spell or trap your opponent might be using. Because what's great about this card is in the fact that it's a continuous trap, which means you can use this effect during your opponent's turn to destroy their field spell card as soon as they bring it out. And the only really restriction this card has is that you can't activate its effect multiple times in the same chain, which is basically to prevent things like creating a huge chain link with itself, or allowing it to activate its effect in response to something trying to destroy it after it already tried to destroy something else at the beginning of the chain. It's just there as kind of insurance and doesn't really affect the viability of the card. I remember watching a deck profile of a person who topped an event playing a Paleozoic frog deck, and he had a full board set up of cards and his opponent activated and evenly matched on him, which made him banish his entire field except for 1 card. And he mentioned that he chose to keep Unending Nightmare as his only card on the field, and it was that choice that won him the duel ultimately, because it was so good at countering what his opponent was doing. Now, this card probably isn't super needed, because even if it is good at destroying a couple of certain kinds of decks, There are also really good other spell and trap card removal cards in the game, like Twin Twisters or Lightning Storm, and those two cards are some of the most played cards in the game. So Unending Nightmare only really works in certain kinds of decks. And at number 7, we have Paleozoic Dinomischus. This card has the effect where you can banish one of your opponent's cards by discarding one card from your hand. And what makes this particularly good is the fact that it's on a trap card, which means you can banish a card during your opponent's turn to disrupt plays. It can target spell or trap cards as well as monsters, and it has an additional graveyard effect where it can come back as a monster, which could be used for other kind of combo plays, like bringing out Totally Awesome. So it's a good effect that also has potential other uses later on in the duel. But it's mainly played inside its own archetype with other Paleozoics. It's just it occasionally sees play outside of its archetype as well, because it has the best effect of all of them, while also sometimes giving you a little bit of extra advantage if you're able to activate its graveyard effect, which allows it to special summon itself as a monster if another trap card in the field is activated. And the fact that so few monsters have protection from being banished makes it excellent card removal. And it also doesn't make you discard until after you know you're about to banish the target. So if your opponent gets rid of the monster you're trying to banish in response to Dinomischus trying to get rid of it, you won't have to discard a card, which is a distinction that other similar cards like this do not have, like Karma Cut or Phoenix Windblast. And at number 6, we have Appointer of the Red Lotus. This card has the effect where you have to pay 2,000 life points in order to look at your opponent's hand. Then select any one card from it and remove it from play until the end of your opponent's next turn, which means the card stays gone for 2 turns essentially, which could be the entire duel when it comes to competitive YuGiOh. Now, this card was supposed to be a worse version of Confiscation or Trap Dust Shoot, which are 2 ban cards that also let you look at your opponent's hand and get rid of one of their cards. But it turns out that effect is so good, and it keeps this card out of play just long enough where even a weaker version of being able to snipe one card from your opponent's hand while also gaining information on your opponent's hand sees lots of play. As if you use this card during your opponent's first turn, you can get rid of important combo pieces in their hand, which would allow them to go into some kind of unbreakable board, or at the very least hamper their ability to break your board on your next turn. Or if you're able to use this card during your second turn, you can use it to start off your turn to get rid of any kind of hand traps in your opponent's hand, so you don't have to worry about disruption, or see what kind of hand traps they have so that you can play around them, like summoning less than 5 monsters if they have Nibiru, for example. Gaining information and sniping cards out of your opponent's hand is super good. That's why pretty much all the cards that let you do that easily are banned or have ridiculous activation requirements associated to them. Appointer of the Red Lotus was supposed to be one of the latter. It was supposed to have ridiculous requirements attached to it, but it was also just strong enough to still see all kinds of competitive play. And at number 5, we have Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Now, if Appointer of the Red Lotus is so good for being able to get rid of one card, Eradicator Epidemic Virus could be considered straight broken against certain kinds of decks, as it can potentially get rid of every card in your opponent's hand. As what it does is, if you're able to meet its activation requirements, you can declare either spell or trap card, then you get to check all cards in your opponent's field, in their hand, and that they draw until the end of their third turn, in order to destroy all cards of the declared type. So, if your opponent is playing Sky Strikers, for example, and they have nothing but spell cards, you could just completely wipe out everything. Or if they're playing Altergeist, where the deck is very trap card reliant, you could basically take out half the cards they're using and completely shut them down with this one card. Now, the activation requirement is kind of why people don't play this in every single deck, where it requires you to tribute a dark monster with 2500 or more attack, which is kind of a steep cost and kind of hard to fulfill in the average deck. Not impossible, just not really worth the effort most of the time. However, in decks that do regularly play high attack dark monsters, like Grenmaju decks, which play a whole bunch of high level dark monsters, or even Cosmo decks, which also easily get out high attack dark monsters, those decks already play other trap cards and can easily put in a couple of Eradicator Epidemic Viruses to completely shut down some decks. Although, a little caveat, a lot of meta decks are very monster effect reliant, and if you're playing this card against one of those decks, it's not going to really do much to hamper whatever they're trying to pull off. So it's not an auto-include staple, because surprisingly its super strong effect doesn't really hinder like half of the competitive decks. But for the ones it does hinder, it can kind of win you the game on its own, which is why the card was limited on the ban list for so long, only unlimited in the past couple of years because the game has kind of gotten to the point where people only play trap cards when they can be activated from the hand or negate monster effects. And at number 4, we have Trap Trick. This card can basically search out any other normal trap card from the deck, and then allow you to activate that trap card the turn it was set. Now, this is some of the best support that trap cards have received, possibly ever, as it allows you to search out almost any normal trap very easily, as the activation requirement is to simply banish another copy of that normal trap card from your deck first, before you're able to set the card you want on your side of the field. Then it locks you out of using any other trap cards that turn except the trap card that you set with its effect. And this used to be really good for searching out Metaverse in order to get Mystic Mine even more consistently, but I kinda think Trap Trick is the reason Metaverse got limited to 1 copy, so that it couldn't be searched out so easily, and since it kind of requires you to have at least 2 copies of the same card in your deck to use. There isn't really a card that searches out spell cards anywhere near as effectively as Trap Trick. The best spell cards have when it comes to good searchers is Left Arm Offering, which has one of the steepest costs for searching out anything in the game. You have to banish your entire hand that has at least 2 other cards in it, and it doesn't even let you set spell or traps during the turn. So the Universal Trap Searcher is super good, and definitely sees play in any deck that wants to use normal trap cards, like Appointer of the Red Lotus or Eradicator Epidemic Virus, and especially Metaverse when that card was still unlimited. They could even be used to pull off stuff like Waking the Dragon straight from the deck if your opponent is trying to destroy your back row, in order to get out a nice Ultimate Falcon or a Nature Exterio to win you the game. And at number 3, we have Compulsory Evacuation Device. This card has the simple effect where you can return 1 monster on the field to the hand. Now, what's great about this card is kind of the same reason Paleozoic Dinomischus is so good, because you can use it during your opponent's turn to disrupt plays, and it gets rid of problematic boss monsters without protection, as few things can prevent being bounced back to the hand. Although Compulse doesn't have a discard cost, and it's kind of the only card like this which doesn't have one, so it's the ultimate non-destruction removal trap card disruptor, and definitely sees play in decks that like to use trap cards because of it. Although it can't be used later on as a monster on the field, like Dinomischus, but the fact that it doesn't require you to discard does mean it sees a little bit more play, but not as much play as trap cards which can be activated from the hand or negate card effects. And at number 2, we have Crackdown. With this card, we are now getting to trap cards which finally compete with the ones that can be activated from the hand or negate card effects, as this one sees tons of competitive play, just not as much play as those kinds, because what this card does is it allows you to steal one of your opponent's monsters, and since it's a trap card, you can use it during your opponent's play to steal a combo piece or prevent them from going to the graveyard, and then use it for your own combo plays on your next turn, which is where the huge value being able to steal your opponent's monsters comes from. That's why cards like Mind Control keep coming on and off the ban list, because people will forget and then remember how good the effect of stealing one of your opponent's monsters is. Now, Crackdown has a whole bunch of limitations on it. The monster you steal can't attack or activate its effects, and if Crackdown is destroyed, your opponent gains the monster back. So it does have built-in counterplay where they can use Twin Twisters to get rid of this card, to either stop you from stealing it or to take it back. But even so, a well-timed Crackdown can win you the games against certain decks, especially if you're able to steal a powerful boss monster like Thunder Dragon Titan or Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess. And at number 1, we have Heavy Storm Duster. Definitely the most played trap card which fits the criteria of this list, but still not as played as cards like Evenly Matched, Infinite Impermanence, or Solemn Judgment, all cards which can be activated from the hand or negate card effects. But what this card does is it allows you to destroy 2 spell or trap cards in the field without a discard cost, so it's basically a Twin Twister in trap card form. And since this is technically a +1 in card advantage, it does still have restrictions because of how strong that effect is, even if it's on a trap card, where you cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card's effect. However, the best time to use this card would be during your opponent's turn anyway, so that doesn't really affect the viability of the card very much. The reason people play Twin Twisters and Lightning Storm over Heavy Storm Duster in larger quantities is because those 2 cards can be used on your first turn to get rid of floodgates, so that you can play the game, or to clear out potential problem face down spell and traps that might hinder them from playing the game as well, or to be able to just push for game. And Heavy Storm Duster is kind of specifically designed to not be used in that way. You have to set it first, so you can't use it during your first turn. It heavily incentivizes you to only use it during your opponent's turn, because it locks you out of the battle phase. But if you simply use it to destroy 2 cards during your opponent's end phase, before your turn starts, it can kind of be like a slower version of Twin Twisters, which saves you card advantage. And since Twin Twisters is so good, even this kind of slower version still sees lots of competitive play, which is why this is the number 1 card on this list. It sees the most amount of competitive play after all the other traps which can be activated from the hand or negate card effects. Alright, and that's the list. I know this is kind of a weird topic with a very specific set of restrictions, but it was a suggestion in one of my previous videos, and the restrictions were entirely reasonable when you know about the metagame in current Yu-Gi-Oh! Where if we didn't have these restrictions, half the list would just be Solemn Judgment cards. Anyways, if you know of any other video ideas similar to this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And also, fun fact, did you know only 36.8% of people who watch these videos are actually subscribed to the channel?